When Elvis was singing on stage and 10-year-old Emma shouted, "You missed a note," the hall froze in silence. But the King of Rock's response to this brave child would make Emma famous worldwide overnight. Emma Rodriguez was an exceptional 10-year-old girl with an extraordinary gift for musical perfection and an almost supernatural ability to detect even the most subtle variations in musical performance. Living in the vibrant city of Los Angeles, California, she had grown up in a household where music wasn't just entertainment, it was a way of life, a language of love, and a source of endless fascination and joy. Emma's mother, Carmen, was a classically trained pianist who had given up her dreams of concert performance to raise her family, channeling her musical passion into teaching piano lessons from their modest home in East LA. Their small house was filled with the constant sound of music, students practicing scales and etudes during the day, Emma experimenting with melodies on the old upright piano in the evening, and the family's extensive record collection playing softly in the background during dinner conversations that often centered around musical theory, composition, and the technical aspects of various performances. What made Emma truly remarkable wasn't just her obvious musical talent, but her incredibly sophisticated ear for musical detail that seemed to operate on a professional level despite her young age. She possessed not only perfect pitch, the rare ability to identify any musical note without reference, but also an intuitive understanding of musical structure, harmony, and performance technique that allowed her to analyze and critique musical performances with the precision of a conservatory-trained musician. Emma's fascination with musical accuracy had begun when she was barely 7 years old, after discovering her mother's collection of Elvis Presley albums, tucked away in a closet box marked college years. Carmen had been a devoted Elvis fan during her youth, attending several of his concerts and collecting every album he released. When Emma first heard Elvis's voice flowing through their home speakers, she became completely captivated, not just by the emotional power and charismatic energy of his performances, but by the remarkable technical skill and vocal precision he brought to every song. The young girl developed an almost obsessive fascination with Elvis's music, spending countless hours studying his vocal techniques, analyzing his phrasing, and memorizing every subtle nuance of his performances. She could tell you exactly which studio sessions produced, which recordings, which takes were selected for final releases, and even which live performances featured variations from the original studio versions. Her knowledge of Elvis's musical catalog was encyclopedic and deeply analytical. She didn't just love the songs, she understood them on a technical level that would have impressed professional music critics. Emma's bedroom became a shrine to musical excellence, with posters of various legendary performers covering the walls, but the centerpiece was a large, professionally framed photograph of Elvis in his iconic white jumpsuit, captured during one of his Las Vegas performances with his arms spread wide and his face radiating the pure joy of musical expression. Beneath the photograph, Emma had carefully written out musical notation for several of Elvis's most complex vocal passages, analyzing the technical aspects of his performances with the dedication of a serious music student. Carmen recognized her daughter's exceptional abilities and did everything she could to nurture Emma's musical development, despite their family's limited financial resources. She provided Emma with advanced piano instruction, encouraged her to participate in school music programs, and even allowed her to sit in on some of the more advanced piano lessons she taught to adult students. Emma absorbed every piece of musical knowledge she encountered, building a sophisticated understanding of music theory and performance technique that far exceeded what most people developed in a lifetime of casual listening. Emma's perfectionist tendencies sometimes created challenges in social situations, as she couldn't help but notice and occasionally point out musical mistakes in school concerts, church services, or even casual singing among friends and family. Her corrections always came from a place of genuine love for musical excellence, rather than any desire to embarrass or criticize others. But Carmen often had to remind Emma about the importance of tact and sensitivity when sharing her musical observations with others who might not appreciate such detailed feedback. Despite her sometimes challenging musical perfectionism, Emma was beloved by those who understood and appreciated her unique gifts. Her music teachers recognized her exceptional abilities and often sought her input on technical questions. Her fellow students learned to value her constructive criticism because it invariably improved their own performances, and her family had come to rely on her musical expertise for everything from selecting background music for gatherings to settling disputes about song lyrics or performance details. The opportunity that would change Emma's life forever came when Elvis announced a special television taping at NBC Studios in Burbank, California. The show, designed to be broadcast as a Christmas special, would feature Elvis performing both his classic hits and some newer material in an intimate studio setting with a small, invited audience. The taping was scheduled to be a career-defining moment for Elvis, showcasing his versatility as a performer and his continued relevance in the rapidly changing music landscape of the late 1960s. When Carmen heard about the taping, she knew immediately that she had to find a way for Emma to be part of the studio audience. The tickets were distributed through a lottery system, and Carmen entered Emma's name with a fervent prayer that her musically gifted daughter might have the chance to see her idol perform in person. When the letter arrived confirming that Emma had been selected to attend the taping, the 10-year-old girl's excitement was so intense that she could barely contain herself. Emma spent weeks preparing for the taping with the thoroughness of a music critic preparing to review a major concert. She reviewed Elvis's entire catalog, studied live performance footage to understand his stage presence and performance techniques, and even practiced sitting quietly and attentively so she could absorb every detail of what promised to be a historic musical event. She carried with her a small notebook where she had written down observations about Elvis's various performance styles, not because she planned to take notes during the taping, but because having her musical thoughts organized made her feel more prepared to appreciate the full scope of what she was about to witness. On the day of the taping, NBC Studios was buzzing with excitement and anticipation. The intimate studio setting, designed to feel more like a concert venue than a television soundstage, was filled with carefully selected audience members who had been chosen to represent Elvis's diverse fan base. Emma and Carmen found their seats about 6 rows back from the small stage, close enough to see every facial expression and hand gesture, but surrounded by other devoted fans who shared their excitement and anticipation. Emma had dressed carefully for the occasion, wearing her best dress and carrying her small notebook, though she had no intention of actually writing during the performance. She wanted to be completely present and focused on every moment of what she knew would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. As she looked around the intimate studio, taking in the professional lighting setup, the carefully positioned cameras, and the small but powerful sound system, she felt as though she was about to witness something truly historic. When Elvis finally appeared, walking onto the small stage wearing a black leather outfit that gave him an edgier, more contemporary look than his usual elaborate jumpsuits, the intimate studio audience erupted into applause that seemed disproportionately loud for the size of the space. Emma clapped until her hands hurt, her young face glowing with pure joy and anticipation as she watched her hero settle in with his guitar for what the show's producers had promised would be an unplugged, intimate performance showcasing Elvis's raw talent without elaborate production. The taping began magnificently, with Elvis performing a series of his classic hits with stripped-down arrangements that highlighted his vocal abilities and natural charisma. Emma listened with the focus focused intensity of a music student attending a master class, marveling at how Elvis's voice sounded even more powerful and nuanced in person than it did on the recordings she had studied so extensively. Every note was precisely placed, every phrase delivered with perfect timing and emotional authenticity. For the first hour of the taping, Elvis's performance was absolutely flawless, and Emma was experiencing pure musical bliss. This was everything she had hoped for and more, a chance to witness her musical hero performing at the height of his abilities in an intimate setting where every technical detail was clearly audible and every artistic choice was on full display. She found herself analyzing not just Elvis's vocal technique, but his stage presence, his interaction with the small audience, and his ability to maintain the energy and authenticity that made his music so compelling. But then, during what was intended to be the climactic moment of the taping, something happened that would create one of the most talked about moments in television history. As Elvis began performing It's Now or Never, one of his most technically demanding songs that showcased his impressive vocal range and classical music training, Emma immediately noticed something that made her heart sink with concern and professional disappointment. Elvis missed a crucial high note in the song's dramatic bridge. It was a subtle mistake that most people in the studio audience might not catch, especially those who weren't intimately familiar with the song's original arrangement. But to Emma's perfectly trained ear and comprehensive knowledge of Elvis's catalog, it was as obvious and jarring as if he had suddenly started singing in a different key entirely. The missed note threw off the song's emotional climax and disrupted the sophisticated vocal arrangement that made It's Now or Never one of Elvis's most impressive technical achievements. Emma could see that Elvis realized something had gone wrong. There was a momentary look of confusion and slight frustration that crossed his face, probably indicating that he was aware he had made an error, but wasn't sure exactly what had happened or how to correct it mid-performance. The song continued, but the missed note had created a ripple effect that affected Elvis's confidence and timing for the remainder of the performance. For most 10-year-olds, this would have been a minor detail that might go completely unnoticed, and certainly not something they would feel compelled to address publicly during a professional television taping. But Emma wasn't most 10-year-olds. Her deep love for musical excellence and her unwavering commitment to helping artists achieve their full potential made it genuinely painful for her to watch Elvis struggle with a song that she knew he could perform perfectly. Emma looked around at the other audience members and the television crew, hoping to see some recognition of the mistake on their faces, but everyone seemed to be enjoying the performance without detecting the technical error that was causing her such distress. Even the show's director and audio engineers, who should have been monitoring the performance for exactly these kinds of issues, seemed satisfied with Elvis's delivery and showed no signs of planning to request another take. But Emma's musical integrity and her genuine love for Elvis's artistry wouldn't allow her to sit there quietly while one of his most beautiful and technically challenging songs was being performed below his usual standards. She knew that Elvis was capable of so much better, and she believed that he would want to know about the mistake so he could deliver the kind of flawless performance that both he and his fans deserved. Without fully considering the social implications of interrupting a professional television taping, without thinking about the cameras that were rolling or the potential embarrassment she might cause to both Elvis and herself, Emma did what her musical instincts and her genuine concern for artistic excellence told her was the right thing to do. She stood up from her seat in the small studio audience, took a deep breath, and called out in a clear, carrying voice that cut through the music and reached every corner of the intimate space. "You missed a note!" The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Elvis's voice stopped abruptly as the words registered, his guitar falling silent as his fingers froze on the strings. The entire NBC studio fell into a stunned silence so complete that the hum of the television equipment seemed unnaturally loud. Every single person in the studio, from the invited audience members to the camera operators, from the show's producers to the audio technicians, friends turned to look in the direction of the voice that had just interrupted one of the most important television tapings of Elvis's career. Carmen felt her heart stop completely as she realized that her 10-year-old daughter had just corrected Elvis Presley during a live television taping that would be broadcast to millions of viewers around the world. She reached out instinctively to pull Emma back down into her seat, her face flushing with a mixture of mortification and protective panic. Around them, other audience members were turning to stare, some with expressions of shock, others with curiosity, and more than a few with what looked like disapproval at the child who had disrupted such an important professional recording. The television cameras, which had been focused on Elvis throughout the performance, now swung toward Emma, capturing her small figure standing among the seated adults. Her face red with sudden awareness of what she had done, but her posture still confident and determined. The show's director, initially confused and annoyed by the interruption, quickly realized that this unexpected moment might actually enhance the authenticity and spontaneity that the producers had been hoping to capture. On the small stage, Elvis stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, his eyes scanning the studio audience as he tried to locate the source of the correction. When his gaze finally found Emma, a small girl with dark hair and an earnest expression, standing among the seated adults with obvious nervousness but unmistakable conviction, something remarkable happened to his expression. Instead of showing anger or irritation at being interrupted and corrected during such an important taping, Elvis's face slowly transformed into one of genuine curiosity, professional interest, and what looked unmistakably like respect for someone who cared enough about musical excellence to speak up about it. "Well now," Elvis said into his microphone, his voice carrying that familiar warmth and professionalism that had made him one of the most beloved entertainers in the world. "It sounds like we have a real musician in our audience tonight." The tension in the studio began to ease slightly as people heard the kindness and genuine interest in Elvis's tone, but everyone remained focused on how this unprecedented situation would unfold. Elvis set his guitar on its stand and walked closer to the edge of the small stage, trying to get a better look at Emma while the cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of this unscripted interaction. "Young lady, did you just tell me I missed a note in one of my own songs?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly through the studio's sound system. There was no defensiveness or anger in his tone, only genuine curiosity and what sounded like admiration for her musical knowledge and courage. Emma, despite her nervousness and sudden awareness that she was now the center of attention in a professional television studio, found her voice and responded with the same confidence and precision that had driven her to speak up in the first place. "Yes, sir. In the bridge of It's Now or Never, during the phrase, 'Tomorrow will be too late,' you were supposed to hit a high B flat, but you sang it as an A instead. It threw off the whole emotional climax of the song." Her response demonstrated not only that she had caught the specific mistake, but that she understood the technical and artistic implications of the error. A murmur of amazement went through the studio audience as people began to understand that this wasn't just a random comment from a child. This was a musically sophisticated observation from someone who clearly understood Elvis's music on a professional level. Elvis paused for a moment, clearly impressed by the technical accuracy and musical insight of Emma's feedback. He picked up his guitar and played through the bridge section again, this time hitting the correct note that Emma had identified. As he sang the proper pitch, his face lit up with a genuine smile of recognition and appreciation. "You know what? You're absolutely right. That's exactly what that note should be. Thank you for catching that." The studio audience began to applaud, recognizing not just Elvis's gracious response, but Emma's remarkable musical knowledge and the courage it had taken to speak up about a technical error during such an important recording. But Elvis wasn't finished with this extraordinary moment. He looked directly at Emma with unmistakable admiration and spoke with genuine emotion in his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want everyone to understand what just happened here. This young lady didn't just catch a mistake. She demonstrated the kind of musical knowledge and artistic artistic integrity that most professional musicians spend years trying to develop. What she did took real courage and real love for music. Elvis then addressed Emma directly, though his words were clearly intended for the television audience as well. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" "Emma Rodriguez," she replied, her confidence growing as she realized that Elvis wasn't just acknowledging her correction, but was genuinely appreciative of her musical input. "Emma Rodriguez," Elvis repeated thoughtfully. "I want you and everyone watching at home to know that you've just reminded me of something very important. Music belongs to everyone who loves it enough to really listen, really understand it, and care enough to help make it better. What you did tonight, speaking up when you heard something that wasn't quite right, that's what real musicians do for each other." He paused, looking around the studio and directly into the television cameras. "This young lady just made this performance better, and she made me a better performer tonight. I hope everyone watching understands how special that is." Elvis then made a decision that would change Emma's life forever. "Emma, I wonder if you'd help me do that song one more time, the right way. Would you come up here and make sure I hit all the right notes?" The request was extraordinary, not just because it came during a professional television taping, but because it represented Elvis's recognition of Emma as a fellow musician whose input had genuine value. The studio audience erupted in encouraging applause as Emma looked at her mother for permission. Carmen, with tears of pride and amazement streaming down her face, nodded enthusiastically. As Emma made her way to the small stage, guided by a production assistant and watched by millions of television cameras, she felt as though she was walking into a dream that was far more wonderful than anything she had ever imagined. When Elvis helped her onto the stage and positioned her where she could hear clearly and be seen by the cameras, Emma felt the weight of this historic moment, but also the joy of being recognized for her musical knowledge and passion. "Now, Emma," Elvis said, "I want you to listen carefully and let me know if I get anything wrong this time, okay? You're my musical director for this song." As Elvis began, "It's now or never again," this time with Emma standing beside him on the stage, something magical happened. His performance was flawless, technically perfect, and emotionally powerful in exactly the way that Emma knew the song was meant to be performed. When he reached the challenging bridge section, he looked at Emma and hit the high B-flat with precision and power, creating the dramatic climax that made the song so effective. Emma smiled and nodded approvingly, and Elvis winked at her in response, creating a moment of musical collaboration and mutual respect that was being captured by television cameras and would be broadcast to millions of viewers. When the song ended, the studio audience gave them both a standing ovation that lasted several minutes, celebrating not just the beautiful performance, but the extraordinary demonstration of musical mentorship and respect they had witnessed. After the taping concluded, the show's producers and network executives immediately recognized that they had captured something unprecedented and valuable. The interaction between Elvis and Emma became the centerpiece of the television special, and the network's publicity department began promoting the show around the remarkable story of the 10-year-old musical prodigy who had corrected Elvis Presley and earned his respect and collaboration. When the show aired several weeks later, Emma's moment with Elvis became an immediate sensation. Television critics praised the authentic, unscripted interaction as a perfect example of Elvis's professionalism and graciousness, while music educators used the story as an example of the importance of musical accuracy and the value of constructive criticism. Newspapers across the country picked up the story, with headlines celebrating the girl who taught Elvis and the 10-year-old musical genius. The response was overwhelming and immediate. Music schools and conservatories reached out to offer Emma scholarships and advanced training opportunities. Record labels expressed interest in her musical potential. Television producers wanted to feature her in other programs. Music magazines requested interviews to understand how a 10-year-old had developed such sophisticated musical knowledge. But perhaps most meaningfully, Emma began receiving letters from young musicians around the world who had been inspired by her courage to speak up for musical excellence. Children and teenagers wrote to tell her how her example had given them the confidence to pursue their own musical dreams, to speak up when they noticed problems in musical performances, and to take their own musical education more seriously. Within months of the television special's broadcast, Emma had become a nationally recognized figure in music education circles. She was invited to speak at music conferences, to participate in master classes with renowned musicians, and to serve as a youth ambassador for various music education programs. Her story had transformed her from a musically gifted child into a symbol of the importance of musical literacy and the value of young people's contributions to artistic excellence. As Emma grew older and continued developing her musical abilities, she never forgot the lesson that Elvis had taught her that night about the importance of graciousness in receiving criticism and the value of collaboration in musical performance. She went on to become a successful musician, conductor, and music educator herself, always crediting that moment with Elvis as the experience that taught her that music was indeed a collaborative art form that benefited when people cared enough about excellence to speak up respectfully and constructively. The NBC special became one of the most celebrated television programs of its era, not just for Elvis's musical performances, but for the authentic moment of musical mentorship and mutual respect that Emma's intervention had created. It demonstrated that great artists welcome constructive input from anyone who genuinely loves and understands music, regardless of their age or professional status. Years later, when Emma had become an established figure in the music world, she would often tell the story of that night to her own students and colleagues, emphasizing the lessons about musical courage, professional graciousness, and the importance of speaking up for artistic excellence that she had learned from Elvis's response to her correction. The moment when a 10-year-old girl's love for musical perfection met Elvis Presley's professional humility and artistic generosity became more than just a memorable television moment. It became a lasting example of how music creates connections across generations and how the pursuit of artistic excellence can bring out the best in everyone involved. Emma's overnight fame was built not just on her remarkable musical knowledge, but on the beautiful example of artistic collaboration and mutual respect that she and Elvis had created together on that historic night.